Hey guys, welcome back to episode 7 of AP Euro Review with Miss Clark. Woohoo! So today we are going to get into the Enlightenment with time period 2. Before we kind of go in there, I want to kind of wrap up. We didn't get quite through all of the absolutist rulers, and so I want to go back through so that way you can compare them to the enlightened rulers that we're going to talk about in a minute. So I briefly mentioned Louis the 14th in my last video, but I do want to get more into his actual things because he is going to definitely set the stage for the Golden Age in France, and then he's also going to be really influential in setting up Louis the 16th for his failures in the French Revolution. So Louis the 14th got to be the king of France when he was very young. And when he became of age, he decided to declare himself his own prime minister, saying that I am the state, which is essentially making him the number one all-around absolute guy to handle everything. And he created that 3-estate system with the clergy being on the top, and then the nobles being next, and then the 3rd estate being basically everybody else. But that 3rd estate is going to be paying 100% of the taxes, having a lot more rules, and only having a tiny fraction of the wealth in France at the time. During this time period, there's this guy, and his name is Jean-Baptiste Colbert, and he is going to be controlling the economy for France. And he is going to be making a ton of money, which goes into Louis XIV's wars and his creation of Versailles. And so when he makes Versailles, he makes it as this like utopia place that is almost in a whole nother world where everybody and all the nobles who are there are completely centered around him 100%. And they keep doing all these pomp and circumstance and all these weird traditions and rituals, and it's all based off of whatever the king wants. And that's controlling everything. So because of Louis XIV's wealth that he's getting from Colbert, it's going into a ton of wars. 2/3 of Louis XIV's reign goes 100% into wars. So the War of Devolution is going to be the first one when he tries unsuccessfully to get Belgium. The second one is going to be the Dutch War, which is again unsuccessful for the most part, and this is basically when he's trying to get revenge from the War of Devolution. And then we get into the 9 Years' War, and the 9 Years' War is going to be a huge battle between France and Britain. And it's not just Britain, it's a whole bunch of people kind of ganging up on France. And it ended up spreading into the 7 Years' War, and the 7 Years' War is going to be in America with all of basically it's called the French and Indian War as well when we're talking about United States history. And then the 4th war is going to be the War of Spanish Succession, which is when he really wanted his grandson to be on the throne of Spain. And so they had to fight a lot of people, and he eventually gets his grandson after a whole guerrilla civil war basically in Spain with the Treaty of Utrecht. Okay, so that's Louis XIV. If we're looking at Prussia, Frederick Wilhelm I is going to be your first absolutist ruler who's taking over. He's going to be weakening the power of the nobles to make himself more powerful. And then in Russia, we're going to be looking at Peter I or Peter the Great, and he's going to be investing in this modernization, this westernization of the European society, which was very, very much still in the medieval ages. And he creates and captures St. Petersburg, which is named after Peter the Great, and it is the window to the west because now they have shipping routes directly to the west, up in that northern part of Russia. So kind of comparing those absolute rulers to the enlightened rulers. So you should probably remember Frederick II of Prussia, and he's going to be really fostering industry, and he's going to be really growing his country. Catherine the Great is taking over from her husband, and she is going to be ruling. She tries to end a lot of the regime against the serfs and trying to fix the Russian society. Towards the end, she was not so successful, but she did try to help the common serfs and the common man. And in Austria, you're going to see Maria Theresa and Joseph I, her son, and they're going to end the feudal system, create more religious toleration. And Frederick and Maria Theresa are going to be enemies big time. And they do not like each other at all. And so that's going to be important to remember. And the Enlightenment. So basically the Enlightenment is when people started to create and think about bigger ideas beyond just the church, and becoming enlightened as far as creating different alternatives on how government should be run and how the world works and human nature, and just creating a more well-educated and philosophical viewpoint. That's why they're called philosophers, people who are in the Enlightenment. One of our first one is going to be John Locke, and he is going to write 2 treatises on civil government, where basically he's writing this idea of a social contract, that the government needs the consent of the governed in order to be successful. Another philosopher is going to be Voltaire, and he is going to be the biggest proponent of deism. And deism is the belief that God created the universe and then he left it. And so it's up to humans, without any God or extraterrestrial intervention, to be able to run society. Rousseau is going to have this idea of, Rousseau's really a hippie. He really is. Free will and majority rule, and that we shouldn't be so constrained by all of the rules and regulations and the churches that are holding humanity in check, in chains. The next one is going to be Montesquieu, and he's going to have that idea of a separation of powers, which is what we currently have in the United States when you're looking at, the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch as separating and not having it be in just one absolutist ruler. Diderot is going to create the very first encyclopedia, and that's going to be our first step on our way to the internet, way far into the future. And increasing education with that. Keynesset is going to have the idea of laissez-faire government, hands-off government. We don't need to always be so involved. And then Adam Smith is going to be a very influential economist, and he's going to create that idea of supply and demand, that they have to balance each other out for a favorable level of trade. When we're talking about feminists during the Enlightenment period, we're going to be talking about Madame Geoffrin and Mary Wollstonecraft, who are going to create the idea of women being a part of society. Of course, we're not quite at the point where women are given suffrage or anything to that point, but they're definitely starting us on that path. And then we have Olympia de Gouges, and she's going to write the Declaration of the Rights of Women and Female Citizenship. And she is going to be the biggest proponent. She's taking the ideas of the French Revolution, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, and she's going to apply that to the female citizenship. And so if you're wondering about that first one, the Declaration of Man, that's going to be in my French Revolution video coming soon. So the Enlightenment is going to not necessarily be something that's going to be like ruler to ruler. It's going to be spread. The ideas are going to be written about and talked about in coffee houses and salons. Now there are not going to be quite as many saloons, and more people are going to be able to be sober and have very intellectual conversations and a growth of knowledge. And part of that is just going to be coming from the agricultural and the commercial revolution. Now people are no longer going to be only subsistence farming, struggling, and not being able to get an education, rise above, and being able to have the free time to discuss the issues. Now with commercial revolution, we have enough wealth to be able to grow the economy, to be able to have these type of conversations, such as what is man, what is government, and how should they play with the ideas of God. And that's basically the Enlightenment.